Okay, and joining me now is Republican Representative Mike Hoadley, and you represent the area, Northern Michigan. What is your area again that you do represent?
Hi, thanks for having me on, Dave. First of all, the 99th District is Aranac County, Iosco County, Ogama County, almost all of Gladwin County except for the three most southern townships, which would be Tobacco, Beaverton, Billings Townships, including the city of Beaverton. They're part of the 95th District with the city of Midland. And I also have the four most eastern townships of Clare County and the three most northern townships of Bay County. So for the listeners out there, that would be basically from Pinconning to Oscoda, over to West Branch, down to just east of the city of Clare.
Okay, a lot of land. I found you because people reached out to me. There's a group on Facebook called Save the Ausable River, and I didn't know much about this, and I started looking into it. So Consumers Energy, they are wanting to make a decision to do something with 13 hydroelectric facilities, and these are these dams? Is that basically what they're dams on certain rivers?
Yes, hydroelectric dams along the river systems, with a few of those being on the Ausable, which directly impacts my district. But there's 13 hydroelectric dams in whole owned by Consumers Energy in the state of Michigan.
Okay, so they came out, I think, this past summer or when it was, and said, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that they may want to sell them, decommission them. What do they want to do? Do we know?
Well, I mean, I don't think they know yet, and I will commend them on including public input to try to feel this out. Because make no mistake, I'll start by saying Consumers Energy has been a partner in our communities, whether it's the backwaters and the economies that have revolved around the backwaters and these dams over 100 years. So they've got kind of a list of options. The one that I think spooked people the most was, over the summer, like you had indicated, when these groups started, when it was proposed that they sell the dams. But prior to that, I mean, again, just to kind of put this in perspectives, we've got 13 of these dams, and Consumers has got an estimated cost of bringing them up to date of anywhere from $7 to $15 million per dam, an overall investment of about $180 million for the 13 dams. And also, let me make it clear, too, that this isn't a decision for tomorrow or next year. They've got about 10 years to figure this out. So they're getting the public input now. So I do give them credit for that. So okay. I guess, we've got about, as my conversations with them have gone, about 5 different options that they're looking at. One, obviously, is invest the $180 million and continue on with the annual maintenance, which isn't cheap either, I might add, for another 100 years, we would hope. That would be the scenario I would like to see happen, and probably, most of our listeners here today. Another one would be to remove the dams, allow them to become just free-flowing rivers like they used to be 100 years ago. That one spooks me the most, and probably most of the residents that live around there, just due to what it would do to the local economies. There's campgrounds built around these, the hunting, the fishing community that has taken advantage of these, the homeowners that have built along these reservoirs. It would be greatly impacted.
Do we know what it would do or not? I mean, that's.
Well, there's studies out there. I mean, we do have the issues with, the silt deposits, over long term of reservoirs, the stumps. It's, what it'll do as far as, bird, duck habitat, all wildlife habitat in general, fish. It could be argued that free flowing rivers would be better for the trout species in the rivers because of the water temperatures cooler and free flowing. But there's also the argument about things like sea lampreys and other invasive species that could come up river too, so there's great concerns on both sides of that. A third option would be to remove the hydroelectric dams and put in more natural structures, rocks, soil, whatever, just to retain the ponds. But they would not be, energy producing, but they also wouldn't be able to control the levels of these reservoirs either. And just instantaneously, the water levels would have to come down because they would be, flow over type natural structure dams to keep the flow of the river.
Yeah.
That one seemed to be the one that, to kind of lay the cards on the table, that seemed to be the option that had the most sparkle in their eye, if you will, in the conversations. A fourth option, like we talked about a little bit earlier, would be to sell the dams. Now they indicated to me on a sale of the dams is they would it would only be an all or nothing purchase on that, meaning a buyer would have to come in and buy all 13 dams. They wouldn't piece these out. But then we're back to ground zero, if you will. You get a new owner, and now they're left with the other three options that we talked about. Do they keep them hydroelectric? Do they do this? Do they take them out? Those questions would remain. A fifth option would be to give the dams to the local counties and then let them deal with it, which then we come back to the same problems. Now, what do the counties do with them? And make no mistake, a lot of these dams are in very rural communities. So they just plain couldn't afford to bring these up to standards at, what did I say earlier here, $7 to $15 million per dam. And, then to say, well, you assess the landowners like you typically would, like what we've seen in the Four Lakes area of Midland over the dam breaches there. And, a lot of turmoil there with a lot of state money spent, special assessments on the residents. Well, when you get up into a lot of these communities, particularly on the Saable River, is you don't have the land ownership, the private land ownership, to be able to assess the kind of money that would be needed to do that. And then, a question I had for Consumers Energy then would be, okay, if the counties did own them and for whatever reason was able to afford to bring them up to standards, and then now what do they do with that energy? How do they deliver that energy, whether it be to the surrounding communities, if that was what they were going to be, as more of a community energy provider, or does consumers buy that energy back from them to put it on the grid? So those questions remain with that option. I don't see that one very viable or sustainable, again, because of the condition of local government.
So what do you hear from your constituents? What's the biggest concern or worry? What's challenging them? What are they worried about?
Well, I think the number one would be the removing of the dams and them becoming a free-flowing river, and what that does to the local landscape, what that does to the landowners, property values, and of course the local economies, whether it's the hunting, fishing community, heck, just the bird watching and photography that happens up there, and the tourism portion of that would be a very large negative impact. Probably behind that is there's become a little bit more of a scare these days with Chinese company involvement, which as we know, there's no such thing as really privately owned Chinese companies. They've all got involvement with the Chinese Communist Party, of course. So then the scare becomes, well, would they entertain selling this to a Chinese company? And then, what impact would that be? Because what would their intent be for that?
Last question, because I just want you to explain. You explain this greatly, but does the state government have any role? Because they're a private. Consumers is a private company, but does the state government have any role in any of this?
Well, one thing I'm trying to be more involved with is how much involvement the Chinese Communist Party can have in our state and whole, whether that's buying farmland, any industry, property close to our military installations, just their overall influence and footprint in the state of Michigan is something that I've been strongly opposed. I'm in a couple different legislative packages that would prohibit them from doing so, and this would fall under the category.
That makes sense. Now, so for example, if consumers wanted to sell all 13 of them, they could sell them to whoever they wanted. They wouldn't need state approval or anything like that.
Not as far as I know. It's something we would challenge and look into, of course. Consumers, DTE, any of our energy providers, they're highly regulated by the state. And, frankly, they would have, some issues even with the federal government as well, because they're highly regulated by the federal government also.
Gotcha. And as you said, this is a discussion that's continuing, and we give them credit. You give them credit for being involved, but this is a process that is ongoing, and it doesn't look like we'll have a decision in the near future, or we don't know.
We really don't know. I wouldn't suspect we'd have a conclusion on this over the next few months, unless something was to develop. And I don't know, maybe having further conversations with them, which I try to do, is maybe there's some posturing here for help funding, because how this started out is consumers laid it out as the hydroelectric dams produce about 1% of the state's energy for the grid. Well, that sounds relatively low. I followed up with a question with them about, well, okay, that's for the overall state, or should I say, how much of that energy from each dam, supplies its local community? What's the megawatt usage of, Oscoda, for example, or Mayo, and, compared to what these dams put out. So I can kind of put this in better perspectives on that. So, one thing we learned, really digging into the green energy aspect, and as we had some heated debate on this last week in the House and Senate sessions. But right now, Michigan's right around 12% of our grid is provided by what's referred to as green or clean renewable energy. So if you back those numbers back a little bit, those hydroelectric dams are really producing about 10% of our overall clean energy bill right now. So I would argue the point with them of how the viability and usability of hydroelectric, which is the very first source of clean renewable energy, and they've been around for 100 years.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to let you go. Have a good week. Hopefully a calm week in Lansing this week. I appreciate you, and I'm going to save your contact. I'm going to bring you back on, and thank you for explaining this.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me on.